In 1717, an English sailor named Henry Every captured a single ship off the coast of India. On board was so much gold and silver that for a time he became one of the most wanted men on earth, hunted not just by one kingdom, but by every major empire of his day. For about half a century, men and women like him turned the world's trade routes into hunting grounds, terrorized empires, and helped create the pirate legends we still see in movies and games today. In this video, we'll explore the true story of the Golden Age of Piracy, how it began, what pirate life was really like, and how it all came crashing down. When most people think of pirates, they picture Hollywood, parrots on shoulders, treasure maps with big red X's, and captains who talk like they've swallowed a book of cliches. The real Golden Age of Piracy, roughly from the mid-1600s to the 1730s, was stranger, harsher, and more complicated than that. To understand it, we need to set the stage. European empires, Spain, England, France, the Dutch Republic, and Portugal, were building global trading networks. Silver from the Americas, sugar from the Caribbean, spices and textiles from Asia. All of this wealth moved by ship. At the same time, wars between these empires were constant. Navies were expensive to build and maintain, so rulers turned to a cheaper tool. Privateers. A privateer was a state-licensed pirate. A captain would receive a government commission called a letter of marque, allowing him to attack enemy ships in wartime and keep a share of the loot. For kings, this was a way to hurt rivals without paying a regular navy for every battle. The problem was simple. When wars ended, thousands of hardened sailors and privateers suddenly found themselves unemployed, heavily armed, and very used to getting rich very quickly. Many of them simply kept going, but now without any legal cover. That is the world in which the Golden Age of Piracy was born. The first mistake people make is thinking pirates appeared out of nowhere as pure outlaws. In reality, many began as loyal servants of their kings. During the 1600s, especially in the Caribbean, English and French privateers, sometimes called buccaneers, attacked Spanish ships and ports with official blessing. Spain was the first great colonial power in the region, and everyone else wanted a share of its silver and sugar. Figures like Henry Morgan made fortunes raiding Spanish strongholds and treasure fleets. He was even knighted and eventually became governor of Jamaica. But as treaties were signed and wars ended, the same rulers who had quietly encouraged raiding began to crack down. Privateering licenses were revoked. Naval budgets were cut. Life on legitimate ships meant low pay, brutal discipline, and high risk. Peace was bad for business. For many sailors, turning to full-time piracy, attacking any ship, not just enemy ones, felt like a natural next step. By the late 1600s and early 1700s, large pirate crews roamed three main regions: the Caribbean and the American East Coast, the west coast of Africa, and the Indian Ocean. They weren't wandering at random, they followed the money: slave ships crossing the Atlantic, Spanish silver fleets, and rich merchant convoys of the East India Companies. Another common misconception is that pirate life was pure chaos, ruled only by violence and whim. In fact, most successful pirate crews had surprisingly strict rules for life on board. Many pirate ships adopted articles, written codes everyone had to swear to. These usually covered how loot would be divided, compensation for injury, rules against stealing from fellow crew members, and how big decisions would be made. Unlike most merchant or naval ships at the time, pirate crews often elected their captains, voted on whether to fight or flee, and shared profits more equally. This did not make them democratic heroes, they were still violent criminals. But for many poor sailors, a pirate ship offered more say and better pay than rigid naval hierarchies where officers were distant nobles and common sailors were easily replaced. Daily life was harsh, food was often rotten and infested with worms. Fresh water could run out. Disease and injury were constant threats. Most pirates died young, in battle, from illness, or on the gallows. Still, the chance to seize in one raid what a sailor might earn in years of honest work made piracy a powerful temptation. You might wonder, if piracy was such a problem, why didn't the empires crush it immediately? For a time, many colonial governors turned a blind eye, or even quietly cooperated. Pirate crews spent their plunder in local taverns, markets, and brothels, boosting colonial economies. They also served as unofficial naval muscle when needed. Certain ports became semi-open pirate havens. Port Royal in Jamaica was notorious in the late 1600s for its wealth and debauchery. After an earthquake destroyed much of Port Royal, attention shifted. In the early 1700s, the town of Nassau in the Bahamas, badly damaged and poorly defended, effectively became a pirate republic. For several years, Nassau functioned as a loose community of captains and crews living off raids in the Caribbean and Atlantic. They repaired ships, divided loot, and plotted their next attacks, often with little immediate interference from any crown. In the Indian Ocean, pirates used bases on Madagascar and nearby islands to strike at the rich trade routes between the Red Sea, India, and Southeast Asia. Ships of the British, Dutch, French, and Mughal empires all sailed these waters, making them a tempting hunting ground. But this freewheeling arrangement could not last. As global trade grew more important, piracy became too expensive to ignore. Merchants complained loudly. Insurance costs rose. Governments realised that uncontrolled raiding was undermining their own tax revenues and authority. By the 1710s, British, French, Spanish, and Dutch authorities began more coordinated campaigns to stamp out piracy. They offered amnesties to pirates who surrendered early, rewards for capturing or killing famous captains, and staged public trials and executions as warnings. The final phase of the Golden Age is filled with names that became legend. Blackbeard, whose real name was probably Edward Teach, or Thatch, cultivated a terrifying image, sticking slow-burning fuses in his beard so that smoke wreathed his face in battle. Calico Jack Rackham, associated with the Skull and Crossbones flag, sailed with Anne Bonny and Mary Red, two women who fought alongside their male counterparts in an age when women had few legal paths to power. These figures operated near the end of the window when piracy could still flourish. They raided shipping lanes, captured prizes, and defied authorities for a while. But the world around them was changing. Naval patrols intensified. Colonial governors were pressured to clean up their ports. Politicians in London, Paris, and Madrid no longer wanted to be embarrassed by high-profile raids on their own commerce. Governors like Woodes Rogers in the Bahamas used a mix of pardons and force to dismantle pirate strongholds. Rogers arrived in Nassau in 1718 with royal backing and warships. He offered amnesty to those who surrendered and hunted down those who refused. By the 1730s, most of the famous captains were dead, captured, or retired into obscurity. Many were hanged and their bodies displayed in chains along busy harbours as a gruesome deterrent. The Golden Age of Piracy was effectively over. To see this period in miniature, we can look at one story, the final days of Blackbeard. Blackbeard likely began as an ordinary sailor, perhaps serving on privateer ships during the War of the Spanish Succession. When peace came and opportunities disappeared, he turned to piracy and quickly rose to command his own vessel. He understood the power of fear. Witnesses described him wearing a large black beard, braided and tied with ribbons, and placing lit fuses under his hat so that smoke curled around his face. This terrifying look was not just for show. If merchant crews were intimidated enough to surrender without a fight, Blackbeard could seize their cargo with minimal risk. In 1717 and 1718, he captured multiple ships and at one point blockaded the port of Charleston in South Carolina, holding the town effectively hostage until his demands for medical supplies were met. For colonial authorities and London merchants, this was a direct challenge that could not be ignored. The British Crown ordered decisive action. The governor of Virginia sent a naval expedition under Lieutenant Robert Maynard to hunt Blackbeard down. In November 1718, Maynard lured Blackbeard into shallow waters off the coast of North Carolina. After a fierce engagement, with close quarters fighting on the decks, Blackbeard was killed. According to reports, he suffered multiple gunshot and sword wounds before finally falling. His head was severed and hung from Maynard's ship as proof of victory. This dramatic end sent a clear message. The age of the great pirate captains was ending, and the ocean would increasingly be ruled by regular navies and regulated trade. The Golden Age of Piracy was not a fantasy world of treasure maps and friendly parrots. It was the messy overlap of imperial expansion, constant war, brutal conditions for ordinary sailors, and the lure of quick wealth outside the law. For a few decades, thousands of men, and some women, chose a life beyond official authority, chasing fortune and a rough kind of freedom. Most paid for it with short, dangerous lives. Their stories survived, retold and reshaped into the myths we know today. Do you think the pirates of this era were mainly rebels against an unjust system, or simply criminals taking advantage of chaos and weak enforcement? If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to Atlas of History for more stories about empires, revolutions, and the people who tried to live outside the rules.